chokwadi pasi pano taiona moto marongera vanoita wepanyika vanoda kudisu vamwe tioneswe moto dai pasina kupindira kwaishe chokwadi pasi pano taiona moto marongera vanoita wepanyika.
Thank you very much for coming through to this show this afternoon. We are bringing you this show on Heart and Soul TV and radio in partnership with Transparency International Zimbabwe, the watchdogs of looking out on issues of corruption, flagging out issues of corruption, and also have made numerous partnerships with the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, where they are also assisting in equipping and ensuring that the Anti-Corruption Commission is effective in its response to corruption. Now, from Transparency International, I'm joined by Comrade Tafadzwa. So I've been, the comrade thing has started. So I'm joined by Comrade Tafadzwa Chikumbu, who is the programs officer from Transparency International. I'm also joined by the head of Sacu, the Special Anti-Corruption Unit in the President's Office, Comrade Tabani Fofu. So we are going to be having this discussion looking into the response on corruption in Zimbabwe and how we are faring as a nation in fighting corruption. I'm just going to ask you maybe just briefly, Comrade Tabani, to just introduce yourself and what your organization does in terms of combating corruption.
Very much. I'm Tabani Vusampofu, not Advocate Pofu. I'm the head of the Special Anti-Corruption Unit in the OPC. The Anti-Corruption Unit was set up in 2018 to augment government efforts in the fight against corruption. It is made up of prosecutors, and what we have done since inception is to specialize on corruption cases, peruse dockets from the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission and the police, prepare those for court and prosecute them. And in doing that, we work under the Prosecutor General of the NPA, Prosecutor General of Zimbabwe, who is the one who issues authorities to prosecute to public prosecutors in the Special Anti-Corruption Unit. So we are right in the thick of things in terms of fighting corruption, in that we specialize in those cases of corruption that come from the institutions that I've mentioned to you.
Thank you very much, Tabani. Now we have this discussion at the backdrop that Transparency International has actually released a CPI report on Zimbabwe, where Zimbabwe has maintained a score of 24 over 100. Now, Tafadzwa, can you just take us through what does this mean for the fight against corruption in Zimbabwe, this CPI report, so that we then build from there?
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Blessed, and good morning to our viewers. I think you can agree with me, Blessed, that there is rampant corruption in the country, corruption both in the central government and also in local authorities. And this corruption perceptions index is one of the globally recognized indicators of corruption. And as a country, we scored 24 out of 100. And just a little bit about the score itself. The score, it ranks countries according to how the business executives and experts perceive corruption to be in public sectors in 180 countries. And a country which is ranked at 0 is one that is highly corrupt, with 100, a score of 100 being a country that is less corrupt. And in this year's CPI, we have countries like New Zealand at 88 out of 100, which shows that it is not practical to have a country which is not corrupt. But as Zimbabwe having a score of 24 out of 100, actually it leaves a lot to be desired in terms of the fight against corruption. So I would think that it is important to look at the score from both a global and a regional perspective, because you look at the global average is around 43 out of 100, with a regional average of 32 out of 100. So for Zimbabwe, it is actually operating far, far below both the regional average and also the global average. So for us, it shows that there is, yes, there's a lot that is happening in the fight against corruption, but we strongly feel that there's little progress in terms of ensuring that we combat corruption in its entirety, despite having made some progress in terms of institutional and legal frameworks. So if you look at 2020, for example, I think the understanding is that the progress that we have made as a country in the fight against corruption has been obliterated by the continuous abuse of public resources, especially by politically exposed persons, in the likes of the former Minister of Health and Child Care. I think for 2020, that was the main issue that was hitting the headlines in the country. But we strongly feel that the prevalence of officials using public office for private gain without facing consequences might also be a reason behind the little progress that we are making as a country. And this is something that I think having Mr. Mpofu with us here, or Comrade Mpofu with us here, is to also hear more in terms of what is happening, because citizens' perspectives and also business perspective I strongly feel that the government is not able to condemn corruption and enforce effective integrity mechanisms across the public sector. We also strongly feel that there is ineffective criminal prosecution for corrupt officials, especially those that are occupying a public office. And so for us, it gives us a moment to reflect in terms of where we are vis-a-vis our global counterparts in terms of the fight against corruption, so that we win this fight against corruption. Just as I conclude, I just want to emphasize that corruption has so many implications on the economy, on the politics of the country. You know, we are viewed as a country that does not respect its own policies and legal frameworks. So for us, we strongly feel that we need to work on ensuring that we reduce the levels of corruption in the country.
Thank you very much, Tafadzo, for that comprehensive. Now I want to come to you, Comrade Tabani. The CPI and what Tafadzo is saying paints a gloomy picture in terms of fighting corruption. Now, can you give us your perspective since the formation of your office? What progress have you made, if any?
Thank you very much. Now, you see, I'm going to be very blunt here. And I expect all of us to be, if this discussion is to be of assistance to our audience and indeed to the country. Now, central and crucial to the success of the fight against corruption in Zimbabwe is the total depoliticization of the fight against corruption. My brother Tafadzwa here mentions that there has been little progress in the fight against corruption. Now, I wouldn't agree, and I think facts bear me out. So just let me give you a little perspective in one area. Since July 2020, we have received and perused the 40 dockets pertaining to corruption at the Harare City Council. Since July. 40 dockets representing 40 arrests, 40 individuals that have, or 40 charges that have emanated from corruption at City Council. 40. Out of those 40, 29 have been allocated trial dates, and the majority would have commenced this month were it not for the restrictions brought about by government on government activities, like court proceedings in curbing the COVID thing. So now, I don't know if we can describe ourselves as a roaring success in the last 2 years, but I think that it would not be an accurate depiction of the situation to say that there has been little progress. I come back to the politicization. If we are to win this fight against corruption, we must take politics out of it. Why do I say that? Democracy in itself has it that in order for the incumbent to be defeated from office, bad or shall I say, let me say bad things that they do, the inefficiencies of the incumbents must be highlighted by those seeking to come into government. Now, to that end, it stands as a matter of reason that if government were to succeed 100% in the fight against corruption, this would not be good for the prospects of those who also aspire to go into power. This is not a situation peculiar to Zimbabwe. It's one that is prevalent all over the world in the so-called democratic world. So the government tries to magnify, sometimes even exaggerate, that's governments all over the world, its successes, whilst opposition tries to magnify and exaggerate the failures. Now, the temptation is then sometimes to downplay even the positives that come out of the incumbent. So I'll come to corruption. I'm not surprised that the CPI, being based on perception, is ranking us so lowly, because we have got many publications that depict and paint a picture of doom and gloom for political reasons, which then is imported by observers who then put our CPI this low. For instance, Tafadzwa says that the highlight of cases last year was Minister Moyo's case. It wasn't actually. From July, the country has been seized by this massive corruption at urban city councils, with 40 arrests there. Amongst those arrested is the mayor of Harare, former mayor of Harare, right? And also, the mayor who took over for him has been arrested and charged. Now, what we expect as Sacu and what we ask for the public to do is to support the fight against corruption, regardless of who the accused persons are and which political formations they come from. So, Tafadzwa, you are right. This fight against corruption in urban councils has been downplayed by most of the independent press, heavily downplayed, because it is perceived to paint the opposition parties in a particular way. And this is not good for things like the CPI index, because people they can only know about Zimbabwe from what they read about Zimbabwe. Now, you mentioned that the director, you were talking about the minister former Minister of Health, the director of the country's Criminal Investigations Department was arrested. And so was the director of the Police Intelligence Unit of the police, was arrested. So it wouldn't be correct to say that, enforcement of law amongst government officials is deemed to be very low. It isn't. Actually, the facts on the ground depict the total opposite. Now, where I think, coming to what you're saying, is the progress. Where we've progressed, I think that we have scored highly, is the increase in the number of cases that actually make it into court for trial. Matters that are given trial dates. I've just given you a tiny sample of just urban city council cases, where we have 29 out of 41 being given trial dates since July last year. So at least what we are witnessing now is that we no longer have a situation whereby accused persons are remanded continuously, and then at the end of the day, they are then released without trial. That is not happening anymore. So, but are we there yet? No. And what do we need to get there? The support of everyone. And how do we get the support of everyone? Depoliticize the process and support the fight, regardless of who is accused of corruption. That is how I see it. They say we've scored 28 out of 40. Look, you don't want to argue with these things, but I think that most of we as Zimbabweans, in how we portray ourselves, contribute to how others outside there who compile these CPRs see us.
Amazing intervention there. But I think for a moment I've lost Tafadzo there. But I want to come back to you and say, these perceptions that are there, Comrade Tabani, aren't they seen in the manner in which these cases are handled? For instance, the Dr. Moyo case, where he actually then came to court driving in his own car, appeared to be getting preferential treatment. Is this what then people see and start magnifying to say, but why is this happening when this guy is facing these serious allegations?
Look, these are public perceptions, and perception is reality, right? And public concerns cannot be ignored. And you can't say public concerns are invalid. I'm not here to say that. Now, in the fight against corruption, you will get these issues. I can tell you that. Minister Moyo is not the only accused person who appeared before the courts and was remanded out of custody with bail not being opposed. This has happened to many opposition figures, so-called opposition figures. But I do accept that sometimes the decisions that you make as public prosecutors may create a certain perception. So I agree that people may have been concerned about that. But what is the upshot of this? Minister Moyo was a government minister. And whilst he was a sitting cabinet minister, he was arrested and charged, brought before the courts, arraigned before the courts, and placed on remand. And as I'm talking to you right now, Minister Moyo is on remand. People may single out Minister Moyo. How about Minister Mfumira? Minister Mfumira was charged, remanded in custody, with the prosecutors invoking the 21-day section that, you know, where an accused person is remanded in court for 21 days and they can't apply for bail while certain processes are being done. Incidentally, Minister Mfumira remains the only person that section has been invoked against in the last 2 years, and that's a government minister. So you see, yes, people may be concerned about one case, but if we look then politicize these issues, we may ignore the fact that a ZANU-PF minister, a sitting cabinet minister, was remanded in custody for 21 days. Now, I hope I've addressed, but like I'm saying that I do agree that as public prosecutors, we need to be alive in the decisions that we make to the perceptions that people have out there. Because you can do 20 right things, but if you do one wrong thing, it is that one wrong thing that will be magnified and it becomes news. And you news people don't like good news, do you?
Yeah, Tafadzwa is back now. Tafadzwa, while you were falling in and out, there appears to be a challenge on the CPI, saying it is not reflective of the true extent of corruption in the country and is not reflective really to the responses that government, especially this government, is doing to curb corruption. What is your response to that, Tafadzwa?
Sorry to interject. I don't know how much Tafadzwa caught, but let me correct you there. I will not go so far as to say the CPI is not reflective of the true situation on the ground. I do not have enough facts nor the competence to make such a comment. But what I can say is that the CPI feeds from the perceptions that we give out there. And I think that sometimes we give perceptions out there more suited or more driven by our political objectives rather than the situation on the ground. So what we may do, for instance, is to downplay the successes that have been scored by government on corruption for political objectives. So I say that what we do skews what then comes out in the CPI. That is not to disqualify it totally and denigrate it. No, I want to be on record as saying that is not my point.
Amazing. Tafadzwa, you can come in.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much, Blessed. And I hear the sentiments coming from Comrade Tabani. Of course, people have reservations with the Corruption Perceptions Index, but I just want to emphasize that this index is a product of consolidation of information coming from 13 data sources, which are gathered from 12 independent institutions. The institutions including the African Development Bank, through its country policy and institutional assessment, the World Bank, the Economist Intelligence Unit, Country Risk Service, the Political and Economic Risk Consultants, Asian Intelligence, so many institutions that looks at issues of governance and anti-corruption. They consolidate information summing up what constitutes corruption. And what we do through the CPI is to consolidate those, reconcile them using the different aspects of corruption into one indicator. But of course, we also acknowledge that this is not, it does not cover all the forms of corruption that include tax fraud, illicit financial flows, and also the role of other enablers of corruption, such as lawyers, consultancies, and financial advisors. But what I want just to emphasize is the fact that the fight against corruption in Zimbabwe, of course, we do not measure the success based on the number of arrests that have been made. It is also important to follow through in terms of prosecution and also conclusion of the cases before the courts. Yes, we can name or bring names of highly politically connected persons who have been arrested in those cases that have been brought before the courts. But as long as we don't see an outcome in any of those cases, because for us as Transparency International Zimbabwe, we strongly feel that these politically connected persons have not yet faced the consequences of the corruption that they've engaged in. And as a result, we strongly feel that there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of ensuring that what we have in our laws is actually being put into practice.
Comrade Tabani, you are in charge of prosecuting these matters. Now, and the issue here is that that Tafadzwa raises is that we do not just look at the arrest, we also want to look at the entire process. And we have seen quite disturbingly so, that these cases, once they are remanded, they appear to die a natural death. Now, can you guide us through what makes it so impossible for you to fast track trials for corruption cases?
You know, in every forum that I've appeared to discuss these issues, I always give this, shall I say, I always put things this way. A court trial is not a football match whose duration is predetermined. That if a case starts, it finishes in 90 minutes like a football match, or in 4 days. Before I expand on that, let me just give you a little perspective. The vast majority of persons that appear in our courts for prosecution do so without legal representation. They cannot afford lawyers. As high as 80%, maybe even higher, of litigants, accused persons that appear in court for prosecution cannot and do not have lawyers, right? Put that on one side. 100% of all accused persons who appear in court on corruption charges have lawyers. Not only that, 80% of those have 2 lawyers, more than 1 lawyer. Now, how does that impact on the trial? You cannot short-circuit or circumvent processes when you engage in prosecution. There are no shortcuts. We have to go through everything. If a lawyer makes an application, no matter how frivolous we may feel it is, it has to be recorded and the court has to make a decision. And make no mistake, because of the severe punishment that visits those convicted of corruption, corruption-accused persons fight very ferociously any application of law that they feel is available to them that may, 1, delay the trial, or 2, obfuscate issues, or 3, render them innocent. They will engage. So prosecutions, criminal prosecutions of corruption trials are an arduous journey. It is a process that cannot be fast-circuited. This is why all over the world, this is not a situation peculiar to Zimbabwe. All over the world, criminal prosecutions of corruption take a very long time. This happens in South Africa. This happens in New Zealand. It happens in the United Kingdom, in the United States, except in China, where they have a peculiar way of doing things. Rightly or wrongly is a debate issue for another day. But that is what happens. So we will not be able to fast-track court processes. But what we have done is to ensure that those people charged with corruption are brought to the courts for trial. I keep mentioning these statistics on city council cases. We have got 41 accused persons who have been arrested since July. 29 have been brought for trial. Now, once trials start, it means that one day they'll be completed. It may take a year. We have had corruption cases elsewhere take 7 years. But once the case is started, it will end. So it is not an accurate reflection that matters are being remanded and remanded and remanded, and they die a natural death. I'm telling you now, I challenge you right now, for anybody to produce one single case that we've dealt with, us and the NPA, that has then died a natural death because of remand. We don't do that anymore. We bring them for trial. Now, coming to what Tafadgo said about index being measured on convictions. Look, I think that is too high a standard that no country in the world would be able to pass. Because as I'm talking to you right now, scour the internet, go through the international press, and tell me in the past 6 weeks how many countries have managed to do 2 corruption convictions. And I mean every country of high-profile people, as you mentioned. It will not be possible to fast-track this, but what we can promise you, what we can promise the public is that these matters will be brought to court. these matters will be brought to court, and they are being brought to court. Now, I understand Tafadzwa, public perception doesn't understand that. People want to see blood on the table, and they want to see convictions, and they want to see them fast. And I can tell you and the public that nobody wants that better than or more seriously than us. We also want that. But there's so many frustrations. I'll tell you that in 7 of the cases that we've started, in fact, not 7, I think that almost every case that we've started in the Magistrates Court since inception in 2018 has had some interference of one way or another from the High Court. In some cases, like a local businessman, whilst the case had commenced in the Magistrates Court, the businessman went to the High Court, where a High Court judge acquitted him. We then took the matter to Supreme Court and won that case, and the matter has now been brought back to the Magistrates Court to commence. Now, what that has meant is a 2-year delay, all those processes. We started prosecution in 2018. In 2019, the High Court judge acquitted him. We spent a large part of all of 2019 and the large part of 2020 going to the Supreme Court to argue the case. We then won it. It's now back to the Magistrates Court, and we'll continue with the prosecution. So these are the hurdles that we come across. And we understand that the public doesn't understand it, but there it is. We cannot circumvent or short-circuit court cases. We always oppose bail. And okay, let's say in most cases, we oppose bail because we feel that corruption is that peculiar offense where if an accused person is allowed the freedom to be out there because of the vast resources at their disposal, there is a high risk of contamination and the manipulation of witnesses. And so
But you didn't oppose bail on Dr. Mpofu, did you? Dr. Moyo?
No, bail wasn't opposed, but it wasn't the only cases. As I've indicated to you before, in the vast majority of cases, you do that. It would be wrong if I were to come to any forum or to court with the view that I will oppose bail in every case, right? Each case is looked at its own merits. Do you know that? It is perfectly permissible where, for instance, you have 6 accused persons, for you to oppose bail against 5 and consent to 1, or vice versa. Because bail is peculiar to the individual and it is peculiar to the circumstances of the case. So it would be wrong for me to say, in all cases, we'll oppose bail. But what I have said is that as much as possible, we do oppose bail for those reasons. In some cases, we don't, where the situation demands that. No, we didn't oppose against Moyo, but we opposed against Mfumira, for instance. But what I'm saying is that why we oppose in most cases is that danger that I've indicated to you. And in 100% of the cases where we have succeeded in the Magistrates Court, the High Court rules otherwise. So 100% of all our accused persons on corruption are out on bail, and that is a fact.
Tafadzwa, the Comrade Tabani talks about this public perception and how the media also reports being sort of a poison chalice in terms of how corruption is perceived. What is your view to that in terms of how you interact with issues of corruption as Transparency International?
As Transparency International Zimbabwe, we do also take into consideration what Comrade Mpofu has actually said. We understand that the court process itself is quite long, and sometimes it might not bring results the way we want results to come, especially in terms of the timing. And this remains a public perception, but we also think that apart from using the convictions, we can also use non-conviction methods like the unexplained wealth orders. Like in this case, is it also possible to use the same order, especially when people that are involved like Mfumira or Dr. Moyo, in Dr. Moyo's case, is it also possible, Mr. Tabani, to use the unexplained wealth orders to ensure that we retain what we feel has been lost? I think you also mentioned that you did not oppose bail, especially in the specific case of Dr. The former health minister. I think for us, it remains one of the key corruption cases that are of interest for us and all the citizens, because we view this particular case as a life and death, because these are COVID-19 resources that were supposed to actually be used by the citizens in terms of safeguarding their health. But then these resources were lost, and then the bail was not opposed. He's moving, he's scot-free, and nothing is happening to him. Even the wealth, there was no order that was given to ensure that we actually probably confiscate some of his assets as we await the finalization of his case.
Sorry, could I answer directly?
Sure, please. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Tafadwa, we view all corruption cases seriously. And we have arrested and charged Minister Moyo. But I'm not too sure if I agree with you where you say this is the case that means the most to the public. Maybe for political reasons it might. But if we were to look at it objectively, we have been dealing with cases at the Harare City Council. You are a resident of Harare. You have seen how service delivery has all but collapsed. You have seen uncollected refuse. You have seen the state of our city council clinics. You have seen the disintegration of our roads. You have seen the dangers that are posed to the public because of untreated water and the lack of water, typhoid and cholera. And this, we feel, in fact, we have seen from evidence, is as a result of rampant corruption at the city council, where city councillors, and they are not alone, and city council officials who are public servants have decided that their core business is to parcel out and sell city council stands for personal benefit. And as a result, they have taken their eye off the ball. Now, yes, Minister Moyo's conduct is one that we should all condemn, and he should be prosecuted to the fullest might of the NPA. And this is going to happen. But there are these other issues that are equally, if not more important to us, because they touch on the public health of large sections of our people. And it's not just the Harare City Council, it's all urban councils, most urban councils, Bulawayo, Gweru, you hear heart-rending stories coming from there. Now, so I think that maybe you might have missed a large part of my presentation, Tafazo. My initial presentation here. Our public has been conditioned through rampant bombardment on social media and some publications that I want. In fact, I think all publications, if serious. The public has been conditioned to view the fight against corruption from a political lens. And that is what I'm saying. I have said, and I'll keep on saying, that we need to stop that. Let us depoliticize the fight against corruption. It affects all of us. And let us join hands there and fight it as one unit. Now, coming to asset forfeiture and other measures that you have mentioned, Tafazo, true, very valid. You make a valid point. Now, you know that Zac have a spokesperson, and I do not have the mandate to speak for them now. But I'll tell you that they have done exceptionally well if information in the public domain is to be considered. They have confiscated property worth hundreds of thousands, if not millions, actually, millions of US dollars from accused persons. In fact, I was reading in the Sunday Mail, I think 2 weeks ago, they actually had a figure of it, and it's not small. So the chairperson, Lois Matanda Moyo, has done a very good job in that regard, where accused persons from Zimra, from Zinara, and other government officials have had their property confiscated in terms of the unexplained wealth orders that come from the High Court. There was the high-profile one that the Prosecutor General was involved in, involving Chihuri and others. So I think in that regard, I think ZAC and the NPA have done exceptionally well. But I agree with you that these are the sort of things that we ought to be doing to augment the fight against corruption in courts through proper trials. I agree, Tafato, but I can assure you that that is being done. And in my opinion, and based on the information on the ground, I think that we've done quite well, Tafato.
Would you sitting there, Comrade Tabani, say that you are doing the utmost without political interference?
Let me tell you, I do not want to be the only source of an answer to that. I want you to look at facts in the public domain. Do not consider my answer. Look at the facts in the public domain. Now, ever since we were appointed on the 9th of June in 2018, we have not received a single instruction from any quarter to proceed in any direction on any matter, be it political or otherwise. As I indicated at the beginning of the at the beginning of my presentation here, we prosecute under the direction of the PG, and the Prosecutor General has been very supportive of us in terms of giving us the certificates to prosecute, and even from him, we have not had any directions to proceed in any way. But that is me talking. Let us look at the accused persons that have appeared in court. And let us look at the politicians, since you ask a political question. Let us say how many politicians from the ruling party have been prosecuted? How many politicians from the opposition parties, including the main opposition party, have been prosecuted? If you consider those facts, you will find that there is no evidence of political interference. But let me point out individuals. You will recall that when the Director of State Residences, Tapfuma, was arrested, all the newspapers in the independent sector were calling him Mnangagwa's ally. Where is he now? He is serving a jail term. We also have Mrs. Mfumira, as I've been indicating to you. People were saying, well, it's factional politics. Only people from the old ZANU, for instance, are the ones who are prosecuted. We have Minister Mfumira, who has received the harshest treatment of all accused persons that have appeared in court for corruption. You know, Mrs. Mfumira was dismissed in the first dispensation towards the end of it as a minister. You know that she was only brought in when His Excellency Mnangagwa took over 2017, 2018. You know that she was appointed by Minister Mnangagwa to serve in the current dispensation. And you know that we were very harsh with her when she appeared before the courts. In fact, the mayor of Harare, Gomba, was then arrested. We didn't invoke the 21-day section, and so did other MDC people. So the facts on the ground bear testimony to the fact that we have not been interfered with when it comes to the prosecution of criminal cases. So yes, I can look you, to answer you, I can look you in the eye, and indeed anybody, and tell you that we received no political direction whatsoever. In fact, just yesterday, a person who is regarded as a ZANU-PF kingpin in Chitungiza was arrested. He will be appearing in court today. He's a land baron. His name is Mabamba. He's not an opposition figure. That.
As you say that, there are issues like, for instance, the Auditor General's report that has pointed out to some serious corruption by people who are considered to be darlings of the new dispensation. And these people have not been touched. You look at the report on the Wange Wanke Colliery mine, where the Minister of Mines there is heavily implicated in serious corruption. You also look at issues that have been brought before the courts in a signed affidavit. The Vice President of this country says that he got a car bought for him by one from Secunda's proprietor, and that would seriously be when this guy does serious business with government. You know, these are issues of corruption that if you were to tackle today, people would look at it and say, no, Sacu is now doing a serious job. Don't you think so?
You have not mentioned that the head of the main opposition party, Nelson Chamisa, has also had serious allegations of corruption leveled against him. We are told, if the press is, because you are getting your information from the press, we are told that he has benefited from vast tracts of land in Harare from his city councillors. Going by that regard, he should also, why haven't we prosecuted him? Now, why do I mention that? I mention that not to equalize, to say, oh, the vice president hasn't been arrested. What about Chamisa? I mention that to say that allegations can be propagated in the press, right?
But I want you to proceed on a factual basis. My allegations are not based on the press. For instance, the Tagwirei Chiwenga issue is based on a High Court affidavit that the Vice President himself presented before court. The issue of Wange National, of Wange Colliery Mine, is propagated by the Auditor General in her reports. These are government reports. So I am simply pinning on government reports that are at your disposal.
All right. Okay, let me come to that. Now, you see, I have behind me here, I have a cupboard full of dockets and cases that are being considered. I am not at liberty to come here and mention that such and such a case is being done such. Indeed, we get lots and lots of reports from people. And it is not always possible for us to say, oh, well, listen, these are all the cases that we're considering. You only hear about them when they come to court. Now, coming to the Auditor General's reports, you will have noted that first of all, let's come to the Auditor General herself. You know that in the previous dispensation, the current Auditor General was dismissed and she was going. You know that she was only brought back by His Excellency President Mnangagwa. What does that indicate? It means that right from the very apex of government, the work of the Auditor General is considered very important. Now, coming to the issues that you mentioned, I can tell you that as the Special Anti-Corruption Unit, we have got many dockets emanating from reports that have then been investigated and refined from the Auditor General's office. I can tell you that. We do have. So the Auditor General's cases are not ignored. I have got an officer sitting at a desk considering reports from the Auditor General's office and liaising with the police on those cases that we feel further investigations have to be done. Let me assure you that you will see prosecutions as we go forward on cases that come from the Auditor General's case. I mean, the Auditor General's reports. I can assure you, and let me assure you, you heard the President announce beginning of this year that he had ordered a forensic audit into Harare City Council. We will prosecute those along with any. But let me invite members of the public right now. There is ZAC and there is Police Anti-Corruption Unit. There is a special unit that has been operating, giving dockets to us within the police, us as Sacu. Take those reports to them and see which ones want to be dealt with. Let us not operate on generalities. Let us say this person was reported and this hasn't been done. Now, you will appreciate I cannot talk about pending cases involving anybody at this stage or in this forum. I can only talk to you about cases that are in court.
Amazing. Tafazo, the Comrade Tabani talks about dockets that are sitting in his office and that they are considering. What issue does turnaround time in terms of when the Auditor General's report is released and to the point where prosecution or even people, the public, begin to know that there's work happening? What does that turnaround time do to the confidence in response to corruption?
Okay. Thank you very much. I do. I have taken note that there are cases that are being handled by the Sacu, and at the same time, those that are directly linked to the work of the Auditor General. I think it is important, and Mr. Mpofu would agree with me that that coordination between government institutions remains very important. Because for us as Transparency International Zimbabwe, we also look at the Auditor General's report. We follow the issues when they are being discussed in Parliament, when government officials and ministers are summoned to Parliament to respond to some of the issues that would have risen from the Auditor General's report. Then thereafter, we don't even know what happens afterwards. So it is very important to have that coordination between what the Auditor General releases, what Parliament does in terms of summoning, and also following through, even summoning the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission and Sacu to Parliament to also give progress in terms of what has happened in terms of those cases. It is not only important in terms of following up on the issues, but it is also important, like you said, in terms of dealing with public perceptions and also public trust in the institutions of government. Because as it stands, everyone gives thumbs up to the Auditor General. They always give thumbs up to the Public Accounts Committee in terms of questioning whoever has been implicated in corruption. But then they remain, they have questions which are not answered in terms of what then happens after those people appear before Parliament. And such forums like this would help in terms of giving citizens the information, because it is very important to retain the social contract that exists between citizens and the government. Because if you pay taxes, for instance, and then one is implicated in corruption amounting to 60 million or figures which are even higher, citizens would think that they simply pay taxes for self-enrichment of those that are politically connected. So we really need that communication between institutions and also ensuring that we build public trust. Some of the information that you have shared, Comrade Mpofu, it's not in the public domain, and we really need to have more of these engagements to ensure that citizens also take note of what really happens in corruption issues. As Transparency International Zimbabwe, we also recognize the complexity of corruption. What really constitutes corruption? We can actually spend a day discussing what constitutes corruption. Is this an issue of corruption or not? And this really is important for the citizens to know and also build the public trust that has been lost over the years.
Let me just do a quick interjection there. Yes, Tafadzwa, you are right. Information dissemination is very important. And I think that that's an area where we could do vast improvement on. But this is also an area where we are seeking the help of the independent press. Let us get the information on corruption and the programs against corruption disseminated out there, outside the political lens. Now, for instance, as I've indicated, I have no mandate to speak for ZAC. They have a spokesperson. But you know, this is information that's in the public domain. That Judge Matanda Moyo instituted this, she has put in place this program where she has formal agreements with state institutions, agreements of cooperation. And she has got an agreement as ZAC with ZIMRA and with the Auditor General. So the public can be assured that the coordination at a formal level between the Auditor General's office and ZAC is actually there. They have a system and rules of sharing information and challenging to each other information that is required in the fight against corruption. But I think you do have a point in that we need to disseminate this to the public. And I think that you and I should join hands and ask everybody in the media, regardless of their political outlook, regardless of their editorial policy, to disseminate this information of corruption out there. Hold the government to account. Yes, that's permissible. I think that that's allowed. It also helps in the fight against corruption, but let's get the information out there outside the political lens.
Thank you. We do that here at Alpha Media Holdings, Heart and Soul TV and Radio. That's why we are having this amazing program in partnership with the Transparency International Zimbabwe. And this is a series of programs that we've had. So far, we've carried about 3 programs with them to ensure that we bring the public and those entrusted with authority to deal with corruption so that they do so. But as we do that, we also want to keep you accountable, Comrade Tabani, and ask you, you being housed in the office of the president, does that not limit your independence?
You know, Singapore is regarded perhaps as the beacon of the fight against corruption in the world. Wouldn't you agree?
Certainly from the CPI point, it's about 88%. It's got 88 marks. Yeah.
In Singapore, the prosecuting unit that fights corruption is housed in the office of the Prime Minister, and it does an effective job. This situation is also there in Malaysia and in Hong Kong. So this situation that we have in Zimbabwe is not peculiar to Zimbabwe. But coming to our situation here, as I have indicated, we are a prosecuting unit largely that then liaises with whose other duties are to liaise with other corruption fighting institutions of government and outside government to complete the government's fight against corruption. When it comes to prosecution, there's only one authority with the mandate to prosecute, and that is the NPA. And the power to prosecute is currently vested in one office, the Prosecutor General's office. It is the Prosecutor General who gives authorities to prosecute. When it comes to prosecution, we fall under the Prosecutor General. He is the one who will direct the dockets that come to us, and we are answerable ultimately in prosecution. Let me repeat it. We are answerable ultimately in prosecution to Prosecutor General Odzi. Now, even if we were housed, I brought the other illustrations to say that even if we had been housed under the president's office and being officially under, it's not peculiar to us. It has happened in other countries and it has actually worked. And you know, I have heard arguments thrown and bandied about that this is an unconstitutional body or we are unconstitutional. One of the first accused persons that was prosecuted by the Special Anti-Corruption Unit was Professor Levinya Gura, who took that very issue to the Supreme Court and didn't succeed. So I can assure you that in terms of independence, both when we look at it factually on the ground and in terms of the law, there is no room for compromise of the independence of prosecution there.
Amazing. Tafazo, your comment?
Yes, I've listened through what Comrade Tabani has actually said. I think what is important, Blessed, is not about where institutions are housed. We should always remain guided by the principles of separation of power, and that should remain as such. But then as citizens, I think this information was not mainly in the public domain. I think we've had a conversation with Parliament, with the Mr. Mpofu in Kadoma, where he was actually explaining even to Parliament in terms of the role of the institution, how it works. because what happens is when institutions are put in place, people also speculate in terms of whether we are also still following the principles of separation of power, and even in terms of if we are not compromising the efficiency of the same institutions. And when it's only when such conversations are actually held, that's when people actually view institutions in terms of the mandate in which they've been created. If then their office falls under the NPA, of course, it still remains their duty to prosecute cases of corruption. But then maybe the question to Mr. Tabani is, so why then does it fall under the office of the president, but still reporting to the prosecutor general? Was it not also important to strengthen the office of the prosecutor general, apart from setting a completely different institution?
Sure.
Now, look, I will confess to you, I have not approached His Excellency and said to him, why did you form this unit? I think that is his prerogative. But what I can tell you is that it is not a situation peculiar to Zimbabwe for the head of state to put in place any office or any organ that he feels, in his opinion, will assist him in whatever program that he has embarked on or he has decided to embark on. Now, as I've indicated before, my kind of office being situated in the office of the president or prime minister or of the head of state is not peculiar, to Zimbabwe. Now, apart from the prosecution of cases, there are other duties that the Special Anti-Corruption Unit has in terms of liaising with other institutions in the fight against corruption. But I don't think that it is untoward. It is untoward. I don't know, Tafazwa, did you catch everything?
No, he was there.
Oh, okay, all right. So I don't think that it's as I've indicated, peculiar to him. And indeed, one would argue that he has that right to form whatever organs within his powers that assist him in whatever programs he engages on. Now, the other way to look at it, Tafadzwa, you know, as I indicated to parliamentarians in Kadoma, that our own constitution envisages the creation of other departments other than the National Prosecuting Office for prosecution purposes. The Constitution actually creates a provision. There is a provision in the Constitution for the creation of another body to do prosecutions, right? And again, this is not peculiar to Zimbabwe. You have it in the United Kingdom, you have it in the United States, where prosecution is conducted on a multilateral platform, depending on the specialization of each prosecuting authority. It's not peculiar to Zimbabwe.
Amazing. We are fast running out of time, but I wanted to. I know you've got your ears. You've got you are watching Harare City Council very closely, Tawani, and you have been after Engineer Chawatam. What is the latest update there? Because there are allegations that Harare City Council has now become a looting paradise.
Well, I can tell you, judging by the dockets that have been brought to our attention, and which are in the public domain in terms of the allegations, that is, at least. Yes, indeed, it's the Harare City Council is very worrying because it looks like it was a free-for-all. The main modus operandi there is that a councillor identifies a piece of land, has it parceled out in stands, and then sells these stands to people. In the past few years, indeed up to now, in United States dollars, $40,000, $50,000, and then that person is then asked to come and pay a token at the city council, whose value has been determined by the evaluators there in RTGS. So when you go there today, you will find stand A of Mount Pleasant, lot B, has been sold for 300,000 RTGS, for instance. But outside that transaction, there is a $40,000 transaction that has been happened between the seller and the councillor and council officials. But let me say, it's just not Harare alone. It seems to be the modus operandi in most urban councils. Basically, they view stands as a commodity and they are parceling out there. You live in Harare. Tell me how many open spaces you see now. Every open space has been parceled out and sold to a garage. Car sales, are you not worried about the proliferation of car sales throughout the city? And we feel that that has had an impact on service delivery. And we need everybody's support. We need everybody's support on that.
Yeah, but I was asking for an update on your aspect of acting town clerk in Chawatama.
Chawatama, I can tell you, I'm not at liberty I cannot disclose that, well, he has been cited here or there. But I can tell you that I have received a report from the police and I've seen the allegations pending against him. And they informed me as late as last night that they had not apprehended that accused person in Chawatama. I'm informed he's still on the run. I haven't had any updates this morning. But as of last night, that is what I was informed by the police.
Amazing. Now, Tafadzwa, let us, as we close the program, I want you to come to recommendations. Let us get to recommendations because Tabani has been strong on how we should, as a collective, right, be able to work together as a nation and make sure that the scourge of corruption is dealt with, and maybe our rankings can go up to Singapore's. So what are your recommendations, Tafadzwa, from Transparency International Zimbabwe?
Okay, thank you, Blessed. I think we have learned that we do have legal and institutional frameworks in place, and we also have institutions that are fighting corruption in Zimbabwe. We always advocate for the government to support these institutions, both financially and technically, to ensure that they diligently exercise their duties. We now have a national anti-corruption strategy, one that was adopted on the 11th of July, 2020. So this national anti-corruption strategy needs to be funded to ensure that we actually win the fight against corruption. There's also a pending issue around the whistleblower protection law. It's one piece of legislation that is still pending in Zimbabwe. So we're advocating for the government to ensure that we facilitate the enactment of this particular piece of legislation and ensure that the public feel free to report on cases of corruption without fear of victimization. Finally, it's also about public procurement. Research has it that between 9 and 15% of resources are lost through public procurement. And we have a strong recommendation for the government to adopt an open and transparent contracting system, one that allows a procurement to be done in a manner that is transparent, fair, honest, cost-effective, and also competitive in line with Section 315 of our Constitution. So these are our recommendations to the government of Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Tafadzwa. Tabani, any of your recommendations or observations as we close?
Yes, I think I come back to what I said earlier on. Tafadzwa's recommendations are very useful, as I'm sure any fair-minded person would say. But I think that the one big thing that I ask is for public participation in the fight against corruption outside the political arena. This corruption, it's beginning to be like a cliche now, but it's an enemy to all of us. And I am asking the press, independent, government, everybody to join in the fight against corruption, to jointly say to the public, corruption is unacceptable, whoever is perpetrating.
Yeah, and any direct message to those who are corrupt, especially those in public offices?
Well, what I can say is that the fight against corruption is very serious, and if you persist in that regard, the long arm of the war will surely catch up with you. That is a promise.
Thank you very much. Just a word from our partners, Transparency International Zimbabwe, in terms maybe Tafadzwa, a closing word from your side, from Transparency International Zimbabwe, as we bring this program to close.
Okay, I just want to reiterate that the fight against corruption is one that should involve all citizens, and the government should always create space for citizens to actively participate in terms of either exposing issues of corruption and also demanding for transparency and accountability in government. So all the citizens of Zimbabwe have a responsibility in the fight against corruption. The Constitution gives us the right to access to information. It gives us the right to and all the freedoms that comes with Chapter 4 of our Constitution. We should grab that opportunity and ensure that we do hold those who occupy public offices to account. I'm quite happy that we have taken this conversation from central government corruption to also local authority corruption, something that citizens do resonate with. And citizens in these respective local authorities, as citizens, they should actually be awake and ensure that they hold the local authorities to account.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you very much, my guests, my panelists, for this amazing interaction. Thank you very much for opening your doors, Tabani, to Sacu, so that the public can actually get into there and understand the work that you do, the challenges that you have, and what you are looking to achieve. Because most of the time some people speak because of lack of information and because doors of those in public offices are open and they do not allow people to get in to understand what is happening. And as Tafadzwa has said, that where there's lack of information, there's a lot of speculation, and the fight against corruption dies. Thank you very much, Transparency International Zimbabwe, for bringing this show to the people of Zimbabwe and partnering with us at Heart and Soul TV and radio, so that we play a critical role in dealing with the scourge that is affecting our country here in Zimbabwe. I am Blessed Mklanga on the situation right now, and thanking our partners at Transparency International and Heart and Soul Broadcasting for bringing this program. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in. We will be inviting you again to have these amazing discussions around corruption and how we can deal with it with our partners, Transparency International Zimbabwe. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you very much.